Hey YouTube, how you doing? This is Nookie with the Booknooken channel review, coming to you today with the review not of a book but of a movie. I have Hulu, and a lot of you are familiar with that. It's like Netflix where you can watch shows, and I was just browsing through and I came across one movie that was called Dreams of a Life. It is about this woman whose name was Joyce Carol Vincent. She lived in London, and she died in her apartment when she was 38. And they did not find this woman for 3 years in this apartment. It's a documentary. It's by, I think her name is Carol Moley. And again, it's called Dreams of a Life. Now, this woman, she was a very beautiful woman, black girl. She was mixed with something. I can't remember, Indian, and I forgot where her father was from. I think he was African. She grew up in London. She had 4 sisters. Her mother died when she was 11. And they didn't really delve into her background, or, when she was younger. They kind of went, said her mom died and she was raised by her sisters, blah, blah, blah. But it goes on to say, when she got older, she was kind of, she wasn't homeless, but she was kind of a drifter. She would stay with friends here, stay with friends there. She was always employed, it seems like, in the movie. She had one really good job. I think she worked for the Treasury in London. But she was this just beautiful woman. In the documentary, they say she hobnobbed with a lot of celebrities. I know she went out to dinner with Stevie Wonder. I think Millie Jackson was one of her friends. And it goes into how, throughout her life, she wanted to be a singer, but then one of her ex-boyfriends was like, well, she really couldn't sing or whatever. But it's just talking about this woman. And it goes on to talk about, I guess she just came home one day from work, went into her apartment. It was right before Christmas, and she died. And nobody found her for 3 years. Now, as I'm watching this documentary, I'm like, okay, the people that are on here, it was like maybe 8 people who were claiming to have been her friends. She wasn't a recluse. She did not go out. She was bubbly. They said she had this wonderful personality, but she really just didn't let people in, so people really didn't know her background. And they even said she had lied and said her father had died, which he hadn't, her mother had, but she had told some of her friends that her dad had died. So they were all thinking her dad had died. It wasn't until this documentary where Carol Moley, the one who did the documentary, was talking to these people and saying, well, what about her father? And they were like, well, he's dead. And she was like, no, he died a year after her. So they were like, well, we didn't know that. She told us her dad was dead. So I don't know what happened to her in her childhood. They didn't really get into that, but something must have happened because something just wasn't right. She had 2 boyfriends, and then one she stayed with for a while, and it was kind of sketchy. For some reason, that movie reminded me of The Crying Game, and I was like, is it the accent or what is it? Because it was kind of abstract to watch it. But I couldn't stop watching it because I was like, I have to know how somebody could be dead in an apartment for 3 years. And they said, here's the thing, they said her TV was still on 3 years later when they found her. Her TV was still on. I was like, well, shit, what type of television was that? So I'm just, in the documentary, she didn't get into, like, talk to a neighbor, talk to somebody. So after, and I just want to say this one lady said, who's supposed to be her friend, in the documentary, she said, oh my God, when she found out that Joyce had died, she was like, oh my God, it's bad enough turning 40, but to turn 40 dead and alone. And I was like, what is she? I had to rewind it. Like, did she just say that? But anyway, so after I watched the documentary, I was like, well, that wasn't enough. It didn't explain enough to me. I must Google this. So I'm Googling it to find out, what went on. How could somebody be dead for 3 years and nobody knows? And she had 4 sisters. Well, as I investigated it, and in the documentary, it was said that the sisters didn't want to be a part of it, of the documentary. They didn't want to talk. And she also had another ex-fiance. He didn't want to talk. But it goes on to say, as I was reading, that she had been in an abusive relationship towards the end of her life, which I guess none of her friends knew about. And she had gone to a shelter for battered women, and they had gotten her an apartment, some type of government subsidized apartment, and that's where she was living when she died. So they said, well, the reason that we didn't know she was dead is because I guess they pay a portion of your rent, and she had a portion to pay, and I guess the biggest portion was coming from the government, and they just ignored the fact for 3 years that she never paid her portion. I don't know what it possibly could have been. And then so I was thinking about the neighbors, and it had to smell because the dying body has a smell. It's not a scent, it's a smell. So it goes on to say in the article that I read that her neighbor said he had gone over there at various different intervals in that 3 years to tell her to turn down her television. He said he would knock on the door, but she wouldn't answer, so he just figured she didn't want to be disturbed. Then I was like, well, didn't he smell something? Well, apparently where she lived, it was a ghetto. And I've never been to London, so I don't know what the streets are like, but they said, that it was pretty dirty over where she lived. So the trash bins always smelled, and I guess they smelled like death. I've smelled stinky trash bins, but if I'm smelling something that smells like a decaying body, I think I'm going to know the difference between garbage and a decaying body, because I've smelled a decaying body before, and it's a smell that you never forget. But anyway, he said, so he just figured it was the trash. Then her sister said, one of her sisters had said that before she had died, she'd hired a private investigator to find Joyce, and he never came up with anything. He was still looking for her while she was dead, unbeknownst to anybody, and he couldn't find her. And I was just like, it really made me think. I think that's what disturbed me so much about it. It just made me think. And then there's a website, there's an interactive website, and this was a couple of years ago. I think this was 2011 when this actually came out, but the website is still up. And it was asking different questions, like if you die, how long would it take someone to find you? And I was sitting here thinking like, okay, well, it'll probably take about 3 hours. But that's just because I'm married, so, 3 hours maybe. But then again, he could walk in here and see me laying down and think I was asleep. That's just about how much attention he pays. So he probably think I was asleep so it could be 3 hours to 24. He'd eventually realize it. Then it was just asking different questions about, and it made me think. My girlfriends, the girlfriends I've had since I was 5, 6, and 7. So, and I only have a small group of girlfriends because I've never been the type to hang out with a bunch of women. Nothing against women, but I am one. So we can get catty and moody and jealous, and I don't have the patience for that. So I keep my circle small. And even though we all live in different states, I can't say that a year has ever gone by. Well, in our 20s maybe. But since we're older, a year hasn't gone by where we have not seen each other, even though we all live in different states. But I started thinking about, okay, a lot of people call me out of the blue sometimes, and every time they call, I'm wondering like, well, I'll see their number and be like, ooh, what do they want? I've never not answered, but I've always been like, ooh, my light went out. I've always been like, well, what's the deal? What's going on? It makes me wonder like, well, what? And I'll talk, but sometimes you can't. What I'm trying to say is sometimes that call out of the blue could be a call for help, because I don't know if this Joyce chick tried to call anybody or anything. I just know she had Christmas presents around her when they found her. So she was wrapping them for somebody. She knew somebody, And it just makes you think sometimes People live a very lonely existence. Sometimes they do it intentionally, sometimes it's not so intentional. But we need to, as a people, just reach out to those that we love, give a call. I changed my number a heck of a lot. So people don't even write my number down in pen. They don't even lock my number in their phone anymore. They're just like, okay, they'll pick it up. Okay, it's you. Because I changed my number a lot. I know people that have had the same cell phone numbers for years, not the kid. And I don't even know why I do that. I have no idea why I do it. I have a landline phone, and people call me prehistoric because I have that thing. But I love my landline phone. I just love it. It's a blessing and a curse, because if people can't get me on the cell phone, then they will call the house phone and they will ping pong back and forth. But anyway, so it's a good movie, Dreams of a Life, by Carol Mobley. And I just check it out and tell me what you think. I just thought it was a really interesting movie, and it really made me think, like, wow, somebody could actually have friends, so to speak, but can lay somewhere dead for 3 years. I mean, she was getting mail and everything. It was a stack of mail at the door, because the mail slot was in the door that goes into the house. And I'm just like, damn, how could 3 years? That's a long time for somebody not to hear from you. And her friends were just like, well, we just figured she was somewhere wandering. Really? I wouldn't even got on that documentary, because I'd have felt so bad, like, oops. So yeah, keep in touch with your people and check out the movie and tell me what you think about it. In the meantime, this is Nookie signing out with the Booknooken channel review. Stay encouraged, and peace, y'all.